Hey guys, Mike here. Welcome back to another video on the channel. What I'm doing in this video is the WJ Knuckle swap. I'm going to be putting that on the Jeep, and obviously that means a number of benefits. Bigger brakes is the primary one, so you're going from like a single piston caliper to a double piston monkey face caliper. It gives you better high steer options because the Knuckles have a couple of eyes on them, so you can kind of configure the 1-ton kit and get rid of the Y-link setup. So I'm going to be getting into all of that in this video, and hopefully by the end of it I'll have a bit of a better steering setup, better brakes, which is the main thing, and some like orange and red shiny shit that I've painted under the vehicle to make it look even more cooler. And when people ask me, I'll be like, yeah, that's custom, mate. That's custom. It's going to be a bit of a long one, but I know there are people out there who like a long one. So I'm just going to go over some stuff you might need, and in my case my setup is a little bit different to how I've seen other people do it, and that's because my Jeep's a right hand drive. If you have a look at the front end, you can see straight away everything's on the opposite side. So in my case I needed to get this knuckle here, which is the right hand drive WJ knuckle. Normally it wouldn't have that eye on the top on the left hand drive models, so that would be completely gone. And in my case obviously you can see that there because that's where my drag link is going to connect to, and then the tie rod is going to be on that bottom one there, hopefully over the knuckle in both cases. So that's basically the way I'm going to go about this. I could have bought this in the right hand drive version as well, missing all of that, but I just went with the mirror side, so this is off a left hand drive. So another thing you're going to need to get is these spacers from JKS. They're about 1/4 inch thick. I think they are exactly 1/4 inch thick actually, so you could make them yourself. But the reason you need them is the knuckle doesn't protrude out as much as the XJ knuckle. So if you wanted to use this knuckle and your XJ axle shafts and XJ hub assembly and bolt it all together, you can't actually get the hub assembly to bolt flat onto the knuckle once the shaft's in place, and it'll scoot around like that. And then when the knuckle turns, the U-joint binds up. There's a lot of people saying this needs to be welded on. It does and it doesn't actually, and it really depends on how deep that mounting surface is to go into this bore, because I've seen on some bearings it's really long and it comes to here, so it actually goes through the spacer and into the original mounting surface like that. But the reality is by welding this on there you end up with a much tougher end product, and I'd probably just do that for safety. All this other stuff I'm going to go through later because, you know, I'm talking a lot. These are the AKEBONO style brake. I got some discs there as too, but they're WJ discs. They will need to be re-drilled. But as you see me build this, I'll go over the parts, or just look in the description. There's a list there. But I'm going to get started anyway. That looks a bit better. Just cleaned it up along the edges just for the welding. So now I'm going to bolt this together, put the hub on and put some bolts in basically, and then this can go in the oven because my wife's out, so she'll never know. I really hope this doesn't stink the whole house out. Okay, this thing's just come out the oven. It's pretty damn hot, so I'll see. Well, yeah, it's pretty bloody hot, so see how it goes. So that's all welded up all the way around. Just going to get this all apart. The other one's in the oven still, so I'll just get that in here, bolt that all up, do the same thing basically. This is going to go back in the oven because I don't have any sand or anything like that. and then I'll switch the oven off, let it cool off really slowly. Alright, so that's it. Doesn't look too bad. Well, the steering knuckles have fully cooled down. They're looking really good. The welds have turned out okay, and there's no cracks, and they look structural. And you know, the next job is really just to get them cleaned up and prepped for paint. But with regards to paint, I decided to paint the brake calipers, and whilst the knuckles were cooling down, I just gave them a bit of a clean, primed them, and then I painted them with some VHT brake caliper paint. And I put those in the oven for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, 150 degrees C. Harden the paint off, and it's hardened up pretty good, and you know, it makes it a bit more chemical resistant really to like brake fluid and everything else. But I'm a little bit forward on in the future now, and I'm just on the disassembly, so I'm just taking the knuckles off. These are the old ones, taking the brakes off, getting the ball joints out. I did the ball joints about 2 years ago, so they've come out really easily, and with a bit of anti-seize. Yeah, it's pretty good, but they need to be replaced obviously. So once this bottom one's out, then we're good to go, and it's coming out real easy. Ooh, there we go. So these are the ball joints I've just removed from, these are the XJ ball joints, and legend has it they're not going to work with this WJ knuckle. I think the top one's good. Yeah, apparently the top one's okay. You can use that one, although this is not looking so hot. And this one here is apparently the one that you can't use. Yeah, so there you go, you can see that playing there. Not much, but enough to give you problems later down the line, and when it comes to steering, don't want to be taking that chance. So this is a WJ ball bag joint, and I think this is the one that's going to work basically. I think this is definitely the bottom one, right? Yeah. Oh, I'm on the wrong fucking one. There we go. Take that boot off, because that's going to basically give us a false reading there. Yeah, there you go. So you can see that that's clamped in there real good. So yeah, you can use the XJ top ball joint, but if you're going to do this, you need to order the bottom one for the WJ knuckle. One thing you can do on the old ball joints though, once you take them out, is take the nut off. The nut's actually kind of useful, because if you sort of want a larger surface area on the nut, they fit on these 1 ton ball joints there, and you can just have like a bigger surface area clamping onto the knuckle. Whether or not the steel is the same as this, or whether it's harder or softer, I'm not sure. There's a potential that it could be a little bit softer, but it's something I'd have to check out. But I've run these for a while. I've not had any issues yet. I'm tightening them up really tight, especially to talk spec, but you know, it's your choice. It's like the beginning of Conan. Just putting in the new ball joints. Bottom one goes in first. There we go. Tighten this sucker up. Just going to see how this hub assembly mounts up. That seems good. So I've got this all bolted up now, just to kind of see how it's all feeling, and it's looking good. Before I get on to the steering, there's probably a number of questions that people might ask about if you're switching over to WJ knuckles, WJ brakes and everything else. Like, why don't you use a WJ unit bearing on the end here? Why would you stick with the XJ1 and weld the spacer on and go to all that trouble? There'll be some really good write-ups online, and if you're going to do this conversion, I suggest you watch as many videos as you can and look at loads of write-ups exactly like I did. One video is never enough, because, you know, unless, you know, you're like Rain Man and you can cover it all, which I can't. But if I had a WJ unit bearing here, I could probably show you. And for me, that's the best way. Like when I visually see something and I'm working with it, I can understand it. But from what I can see on the images and from what I can understand from the write-ups, it's to do with the fact that I think a WJ is going to use a CV joint, from what I understand, and the XJ uses a U joint, and it's the mounting position of the way the stub shaft goes into the unit bearing. The actual depth and the mounting faces are not in the same alignment for a U joint as they would be for a CV. So from one picture I've seen, it doesn't even look like there's enough thread to put the nut on with a washer and then have a cotter pin if you're using a WJ unit bearing with the stub shaft from an XJ. There's just not enough coming through because of that mounting position difference on the inside of the face of that unit bearing. So it looks like there would be some complications there, and I'm sure with continued expense you could fix it like anything. You know, maybe there's a kit out there, maybe get WJ U-joint conversion kit with a longer stub shaft and it would work, and you could use that and put it on the end of the XJ shaft and go down that route. I'm sure someone's done it and there's a way of doing it, but I guess it's all just continued expense and however far you want to go with this. But in my case, I'm just going to stick with the XJ unit bearing. These bearings are less than a year old. I'm perfectly happy with them, perfectly happy with using them, and you know, I'll just stick with that. But anyway, explore it as best you can. So I'm going to start getting into steering, and this is the drag link for the, comes off the pitman arm. Obviously I want this here, but I've got to cut all this off. This is all going to have to go. I'm going to have to build something completely new, and that's going to be a pain in the ass, but it's the way it has to be. I'll leave it there like that, because obviously I'm still getting this set up, but that's what I'm looking at. So I've reamed this other one out, not like that. And you can see I'm using the polyurethane cure. And kind of how you want these, I think, is really just so that you're just biting down on that. I actually use a stainless spacer in there as well, inside the cure, to eliminate a lot of tie rod roll, but it still gives the tie rod a lot of natural movement. So you're not sort of binding up the tie rod, but you're you know, you're just taking away the excess movement. But it's worked for me for, well, the last kind of 5 or 6 years, but to get rid of tie rod roll. And I'm in a lot of trouble getting this off. And the reason I'm trying to get it off is because this side's seized up and the other side isn't. And I don't want like no thread engagement that side and loads of thread engagement this side, because these eyes for the tie rod are further apart on the YJ setup, so I'm having to drastically alter this, which is something to bear in mind. But I put a ton of WD-40 down the end and left it for about an hour, and it seems to be moving now, which is actually pretty good. So now that I've got those tie rods off, I can adjust the wheel alignment, because the knuckles are obviously different to the XJ knuckles, so the alignment's totally out. So that's our first thing that I really need to do before I even get into anything else. So these need to be drilled for the XJ stud pattern, because this is a WJ brake disc. So you can see right away that if you had the other side of the hub and you took the studs out, you could actually line up everything a little bit easier and do it probably a better way, because then you have that internal bore to kind of mount these up properly. But in my case, I'm kind of just lining this up. Now first off, I've measured between here and marked it. The reason I've measured that is so I can find the halfway line. This is not the best way of doing it, by the way. I'm not condoning that you should do this. You know, this is all I've got basically, and I don't have anything the right internal diameter to sort of make sure that this is all kind of lined up. But that looks to be okay. And I guess you oversize the holes slightly, and I'm just using this 11mm socket as a guide. A shit guide, but this is all I've got. Just make sure it hasn't moved at all. Looks alright. That's it. There we go, 5 holes drilled. For some reason I just felt like that would be a lot harder, for some reason, I don't know why. So I started off with a 13mm, and these holes are, well, you know, they're close to 16mm, 15.78, so let's call it 16. So this here is a 15, next one up I'll do is a 16. And then we'll go. But this is a very good drill bit, mine. This one here, it's dead sharp and it seems to hold its edge, but these are a bit crapper. We'll see how it goes. My 16mm is dull, so I'm not sure I want to go up to 17. Probably wouldn't hurt, because I mean it's this that's keeping it central, but there you go. 15 will do, and that's pretty good there. So I'll just bevel the edges. So I'm about to do a wheel alignment, and I'm using these two levels here, and they're exactly the same length and exactly the same diameter, conveniently enough, but I've measured them and divided it by 2 and marked a centre line and lined that up with the centre of the axle shaft here. And basically what I'm going to do is do exactly the same the other side. I'm using the bubble to make sure that this is completely level, and the reason I'm doing that is not because it needs to be level, but it just means that I know that both of them are in exactly the same position either side, and there's both the same amount of length sticking out either side. You don't want this side really long and this side really short. They need to be measured in exactly the same position, basically. So wherever you measure from at the front, you need to measure from at the back. It needs to be in the same position, or else you'll get duff readings and the alignment will be out. So in this case, it's going to be easier to use these levels on the bottom. And one thing to note is that you need them both in a similar position if you're doing it like me, because you can see the diff is kind of throwing them out. So if you can get them both in the same position, it takes a bit of time. But if I just level this one, they're both 30 centimeters off the ground in each corner, and both bubble levels are level. So that's as close as I can get it in my crappy little workshop. So I'm going to start playing around with this now and adjusting tie rods. So 59 and 3/8 on this side here. and we are looking at 60 1/4. So obviously it's towed in a heck of a lot, so time to adjust that. We'll go like that. Got to make sure these tie rods are really well seated as well, or else that'll give you a bit of a false reading as well. So that's actually 59 13/16. And this is also 59 13/16. So we're bang on, 0. So I need to move the tie rod out a little bit. No, yeah. I need to move the tie rod in a little bit more to get 1/8 of an inch toe in. So moving it in 1 turn, which should give me what I'm looking for. There we are. So that has moved it in by 1/8 of an inch to 59 11/16. 59 13/16. So we've 1/8 of an inch difference. I'll try the front. 59 and just over 11/16. So the back being 13/16. So that's kind of almost a 1/8 of an inch toe in. Probably is 1/8 of an inch toe in with that 1 turn of the tie rod. So that's it. I've just checked the steering wheel and it's perfectly straight, but that doesn't mean a damn thing actually, because when I get this thing out on its wheels and I start driving it, I'll know then. And so what I'll do is I'll leave these jam nuts loose for now until it's first kind of tootle around. I'll see what the steering wheel does and I'll adjust it at the end. But time to get the brakes on and see if it all actually works. So I've put one side on, but the other side isn't done yet, so don't worry, I'll show you that. But I had some technical issues with the holes not being exactly aligned on one of the holes, and that's obvious given the kind of garage I've got and the method I used to drill it. But this one's together and it's clearing. I've had to use a 4mm spacer to center this portion here, this brake pad guide, which I knew I had to do anyway. But I'll show you the other side and show you some of the issues I've had, and then we'll put that together. So given the way I drilled them, it was pretty obvious that there's room for slight misalignment. So in one of the back ones there, I've drilled that out to 18mm, and it's because of the back of these studs where they just come through the hub. You'll see there's a little bit of a larger piece. So 15mm isn't going to work. They do need to be sort of around 16mm to clear the back of the hub. And if you do run into trouble because you're doing it a crappy way like me, you can kind of drill out from the back a little bit so the hole isn't like ridiculously oversized. And that seems to have worked really well. Now the whole thing mounts up nice and flat. The first part is to put this on, which basically fits over the disc like that, but you can see in my case it contacts the disc. So they normally suggest some spacers. There's actually a kit you can buy to do this properly. I'm just going to use some washers, which are 4.5mm. You can see they fit in there quite nicely. They're quite large, and that should give me the spacing I need to make this fit correctly. But I'm doing it the wrong way. There we go. So that's sort of moving quite nicely. It could actually go about 1mm out a little bit more. I could increase the spacer size by 0.5mm or 1mm if I wanted it more central, and I might do that at the end, but it seems to be okay. Next thing is to put these clips on. Pretty easy to do. They just click on like that and you lose all the paint that you just spent ages putting on, but you know, whatever. And then the pads just slip on in. Oh, see what I was doing there? Absolute spud. It was going in backwards. Do not want to be doing that. Looking smart. And now time for the actual caliper itself. There we are. So looking pretty smart. One thing you've got to bear in mind is I don't use a standard brake line. I have some extended lines, and these work fine with this particular caliper, but if you're using a standard Cherokee line you might have some issues because it's notched. Oh, does it fit? Come on, does it fit? Yeah, you can see it in the... It is just clearing in most areas. Maybe there's some like punched text on the inside or something stamped, or because it turns good, and then like you can see it's sort of basically clear here, so that's clear, and then the wheel comes round and there it makes contact, so you can see that there. And then it makes contact pretty bad on this side, and now it's all good. So I guess that the actual wheel itself has imperfections in its build. So this is a -20 offset rim, which translates to 3.75 inches of backspacing, there and thereabouts. I think that's exactly what it is actually, and it's just touching the caliper. I guess not all rims are going to be made equal, so there might be some rims out there that are a slightly different shape with the same backspacing and they're going to work just fine. But note to self, test for everything before painting, because it was a complete waste of time and now I'm going to have to probably do it again. But that's okay, you know, I've got to pull all this apart to paint it and get it all finalised, and I've still got to build a sway bar mount. So there's the contact here, along here, and just a little bit here. It's just clearly just where this metal has got just some slight imperfections in it. This is a Jack Wheeler steel beadlock wheel, so just in case you have those or you're going to buy those, yeah, be warned. So it really didn't take a lot with the flapper wheel. I barely took anything off actually, just a mil in some areas, just a really small amount across the contact point. Honestly, all that painting, it's just total flipping waste of time, but whatever. So I'm days ahead again, and you can see that everything's been painted and it's pretty much back together, and it's looking pretty good. It's a little bit You've Been Tangoed, a bit too much orange, but they stopped sort of stocking silver in the shop that I went to, because I usually quite like these arms to be in silver, but you know, I just used the orange paint I had. But with regards to the knuckles, I used VHT high temperature paint, not like the brake caliper stuff that's real high temp, but something around about like 300 degrees C. The reason I did that is I had some engine paint, it was orange, I wanted orange knuckles, and I basically cleaned them really thoroughly. Like the prep work I've had to put into the cast irons, quite a lot more than kind of regular steel, because cast iron can hold a lot of moisture. So after they were all sanded down, and I used like an oscillating sander with 80 grit, like got them all real nice, I then put them in the oven. And first I actually degreased them with like an engine degreaser, and then I brake cleaned them and wiped them down with clean rags, then put them in the oven, heated them up so that all the moisture would leave the pores of the cast iron, and then after that let them cool down so they were just warm to the touch, primed them, a couple of coats of primer. This is 4 coats of high temperature paint, let dry for 24 hours, then in the oven, cured for about 1 hour at about 150 degrees C, and now it's, you know, it's rock hard, and you can sort of put your nail on it and go crazy with it, and you know, you've got some good adhesion there, so they should last a while. But to be honest with you, like a lot of the paintwork under here, as soon as you start driving it, it's just going to look like crap anyway, but hopefully it will look good for longer. But the main thing that really has been troubling me is the sway bar link. I tried everything to kind of put something in the original place and just have it longer and sticking up, but there is no way that that is going to work. So I looked at a kit online that you can buy, and it mounts to the actual seat, and I thought, well, I'm not going to be able to order that because I live in Europe and the shipping will probably be more than the part, and then I'll get taxed on the part when it arrives, so I'll build it. So I basically went to a trailer company we've got locally here, picked up a piece of steel, and I've just put some cuts in it and some bends in it, walled it at the side so you've got like a little bit of side support, and I've welded it onto the C. It's probably better to do that before you put the ball joint in. It's not impossible to do because it's not that much welding. It's not like putting like a C gusset in where it's a lot more heat, but I had to take my time. I used a fan to cool it down with cool air in between welds. The surface had to be really clean, but I've got a very, very strong bracket now just mounted on the side there, and you know, it's not the prettiest of welds onto that C bracket, but you know, it is very structural and it's welded all the way around, and I did the best I could really. So that's kind of raised it right up above the drag link, and if I turn the steering wheel you'll see the clearance. One thing to note when making this is I actually cut a notch out of it so it's slotted onto the C and then welded all the way around like that, so you've got quite a lot of support around it. It's not just welded at the top. My only real concern now that I've actually made it and I'm looking at it is, will the coil make contact with it? There's quite a bit of space really between the coil and the actual bracket, and if you think about the amount of upward travel, you know, the whole axle is going to be moving together. It should be fine, but one thing's for sure is this link here needs to be shortened by a couple of inches, so I'm not sure how much thread I've got in here, but maybe I've got enough to clip an inch off each side. So this side's masked off and ready to go. I never mentioned earlier actually why I bought this one here. I didn't get the right hand drive version, which wouldn't have that at all, so that would be gone, and that's just because it's so hard to find the right hand drive variants of these knuckles. I was really lucky with that one, and I was very lucky that chap in Russia was prepared to send it to me, because there was only two available, one in Poland and one in Russia, and the guy in Poland didn't respond, so it's easier for me to just order this one. You know, I just ordered it from the US. I think I found a right hand drive version in the US and it was $400, and to get this one was like something like $50, and the shipping was really cheap, so it was just easier for me to get that. And obviously I could cut that off, but that would mean less orange under the vehicle, you know, and I kind of want as much orange as possible right now. It's really the purpose of this. But I've actually ordered outer axle seals and inner axle seals for this axle too. Now, interestingly enough, after doing this mod, I've noticed a lot less axle shaft deflection at the knuckle side of the axle shaft. And if you're not familiar with axle deflection, it's like, if you think about the way they built the Dana 30, the axle seals, the pinion seal, not the pinion seal, the axle shaft seal is all the way back closest to the diff. You know, and the reason that that is kind of done that way is because with a U-joint at the end here, you do get a little bit of deflection on the shaft, and obviously the deflection will be absolutely nothing back there, but it's going to be a lot here. So if you looked at my setup previously, I did a video about it, you can see there's a little bit of axle deflection, and you know, the seals can kind of burp water if you make turns as you're going through like deep water crossings that go over the axle, because as you turn the wheel, the axle shaft moves by just a tiny amount, and the seal can be worn and it will let water in, but it doesn't let it out so easy. So I'm going to try again with those. I bought some cheapo China ones, and because of the lack of movement on the shaft, I think it might just function a little bit better, and perhaps I can make my own seals like I did last time. When those wear out, or kind of build something to go inside it, because there's like a spring clip that keeps the seal in. But as you probably noticed at the end of the video, so I tend to talk a lot at the end of the video, but this project's been you know, a lot more involved than I thought it would be. I think the sway bar mounts are kind of the most annoying part of this, but they seem to be turning out okay in my case, and I've just used some standard bits of steel. I think if you're going to do this project, watch as many videos as you can, go online and look at write-ups and try stuff out, and you know, just give it a go. But I think the longest thing in my case is that I wanted to obviously do a good job on the painting. Like if you didn't really give a shit about that, then it would go way quicker. But I've had to strip down the calipers again and obviously take some material off of that. And a friend told me, because I took 0.5 mil off those calipers, he said, is that going to be enough? And I was like, well, it should be, it doesn't need to clear by much. And he was like, well, the calipers are going to expand when they get hot. So I've actually taken another mil off now, so there's a little bit more room between the wheel and the caliper, so that's something to bear in mind. But anyway, thanks for watching. See you again in another video. Take care.